This is the sixth day of war now between Israel and Hamas. We wanted to get an update from someone who knows what's happening on the ground. And so right now we're going to be joined by Israeli Defense Forces International spokesperson, Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserve, John Conricus. He joins me. And Jonathan, thanks so much for being with us. I think your face by now is very, very familiar to a lot of our viewers, to a lot of people on social media. You've been providing updates constantly about this. But for our viewers who aren't as familiar, please explain what the IDF even is. That is the main fighting force for the nation of Israel.
Yes, we are. I'd start with saying something that you may not expect me to say, but my organization fell short. We did not deliver on what we are supposed to do, and on the 7th of October, hundreds, let's say more than hundreds, more than 1,000 terrorists infiltrated into Israel and butchered Israeli civilians. And I say that with a very heavy heart. We have 1,300 dead Israelis, 3,000 wounded. Currently in Israel, there is a nationwide scale operation which is focused only on identifying bodies and bringing them to a proper burial. And it encompasses most of the ministries of the government. Now, about the IDF, we are on the 7th day of the fighting of this war that was forced upon us, that we did not ask for and did not initiate. Probably the worst starting point of any of our wars in our history, how this war started. But now with a very clear purpose and understanding of what needs to be done and how important it is that this war will end with us dismantling all of Hamas and its military capabilities. That is what we are aiming to do.
Sure, and we have this live picture there in Gaza at the moment. Can you speak to the preparations or the planning in place at the moment on whether or not there is going to be a ground offensive in Gaza? I've been asking a lot of our experts on whether or not they think Israel is going to reoccupy the Gaza Strip. Is that on the table?
Well, you see, we are not focusing on reoccupying. As I said, our aim, our goal is to strike Hamas and to take away from Hamas all of the military capabilities that they have been able to build over the years. Many of their weapons have been provided by Iran. Much of their funding has been provided by Iran. Other parts of their funding has been taken from the international aid provided to Gaza, intended for civilians, but used by Hamas, by the way, to build the very rockets that we just see fired now on the screen. And what we are going to do is to dismantle all that, because the reality that we have at our doorsteps is something that is untenable and it is impossible to continue. And frankly, it should never have come to this. But now that the truth is clear for everybody to see, that we have a murderous ISIS-like entity on our borders, we are compelled to act, and this will be strong and clear, and at the end, Hamas will be defeated.
Yeah, now we know there's about 300,000 IDF reservists called up for a pending offensive there in Gaza. We also know that about 300,000 Gazan civilians as well have been displaced by this. Is the Israeli military and the Israeli government, are there talks for a humanitarian corridor once this gets underway there in Gaza?
Of course, the humanitarian perspective is important, and we are well aware of the needs and the vulnerability of the civilian population, and they are not our enemies and they are not our target. We will do everything that we can, everything feasible that allows us to conduct ourselves and implement our military goals. We will do everything feasible in order to have Gazan civilians out of harm's way. But I must say, Hamas has, by default, by strategy, built a system by which they put their civilians in front of the fighters and use them as their human shields. They use civilian infrastructure for military purposes, and they hide in tunnels underneath the civilians. So it will be challenging, but I can assure you and the rest of the world that we are committed to the laws of armed conflict, and we are going to fight according to those standards.
I also want to ask you as well, because today the IDF released video of this hostage rescue on Twitter. And let's talk about what the planning, what the preparations is right now for getting these 150 plus hostages back onto the Israeli side here. So that video referenced the Flotilla 13 elite unit. Can you speak about some of these specialized units within the IDF and how they're playing a role in the war? Can you offer anything right now? Give us a sense. Maybe you don't know, maybe you're keeping it close to your vest, but I think the wider world needs to know how these hostages are going to get back.
Yeah, so the video that I'm sure we'll be seeing momentarily is of our equivalent of US Navy SEALs, to make it easy. Similar caliber of men, hardened fighters, very high competency, and these were some of the units that responded to the hostage situations that we encountered in many of the communities around the Gaza Strip. And the footage shows, as I'm sure you've seen, very serious fighting of highly trained and skilled professional fighters who were going in with a very clear task to kill terrorists. Some of them were apprehended and they weren't killed, but to kill terrorists and free the hostages. And in most cases, that is what happened. These special forces, we have other elite units, the police counterterrorism unit, and many other units that were part of these operations that went village to village, community to community, and simply had to fight their way in and then take down terrorists that were holding Israeli civilians hostage. Regarding the situation inside Gaza, listen, this is the most complex and sensitive mission that I think the IDF has ever faced. Unprecedented. Never before have so many Israelis been taken, abducted by any terror organization, and I don't think that any Western country has faced a similar situation. What we are going to do and what we're doing now is focusing all of the intelligence collection assets of the State of Israel in order to generate as much as possible intelligence to understand where they're being held, who is holding them, how we can get to them, and then formulate a plan and execute it in order to get these people back.
Yeah.
It is going to be very challenging because for sure Hamas has prepared for this and they are probably waiting for us to come. That will not deter us. And last thing, our Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, said today, it is our top priority and we will not rest until these people are back home.
Yeah. Well, that same Chief of Staff did come out today and said some initial mistakes were made. When you talk about, and you mentioned that at the outset of this interview, that the IDF didn't do its job because they did not thwart this attack. Is it too early for some in the IDF, some in the Israeli government to investigate how this happened, whether or not there was a failure of some of this intelligence that we have seen? Or is the task at hand right now striking these Hamas targets? Or is that going to come later, this investigation into how this happened? More than 1,000 Hamas terrorists infiltrating the southern border there near Gaza. Are people still shocked by that?
Yes. I mean, all of what you said is right. I've spoken to so many Israeli officers, and the common denominator is anger and shame. Shame at the fact that a terrorist organization was able to do this to Israeli civilians, and anger at the fact that it happened, but also resolve and focus on what needs to be done. And the Chief of Staff said it very clearly. There will be a time for reckoning, for after-action reviews, and for hard answers to be given. And we will give those to the Israeli public because they are entitled to have them.
Yeah. All right, just lastly, too, we know that we're almost a week now into this conflict and the concerns about a regional spillover in the north there with Hezbollah, in the Golan with Syria. Are some of those concerns allayed right now, or are they still front and center? Are they still very present? Because the former leader of Hamas today called for a global day of jihad tomorrow, Friday, the 13th. Are you having that kind of in the back of your mind at this point in time, that that is what is called for by the former leader of Hamas while this war goes on?
Front and center. That is where the focus of that is. And we're seeing all around us are Iranian proxies, terror organizations that Iran has financed, built, and equipped with money and personnel. I am sure that they are thinking and contemplating whether or not this is a good time to join in the fight and make life more difficult for us. Sincerely, I hope for the sake of Lebanese civilians and other areas, for them not to try and then for them not to escalate the situation.
Yeah.
If they do so, we will be prepared and we will respond just as we are going to respond and as we are responding now in Gaza. And I think that at the end of it, it will be abundantly clear what a mistake it was by Hamas to do these atrocious, horrible attacks against our civilians, unprovoked and unprecedented.
Yeah, just lastly, sir, because I keep reminding our viewers, Israel is a small nation, 8 or 9 million people, and you know what happened to it. Everyone is impacted by it in some way. On a personal level, how have you been impacted by it in a personal way? Because did you know people who lost their lives? Do you know people who are missing? Do you know people who are missing or lost their lives? It's all so personal.
For everyone in Israel, it is personal. And in some cases, you could say that we are one big extended family. Yes, I have friends who have had close family members executed by Hamas civilians. Half of my family is back in the military in the reserves, both on the northern border and on the southern border. And I have friends of friends that are missing and presumed taken hostages in Gaza. So yes, everything is up close and personal, and it is extremely real for so many Israelis.
All right, Jonathan Conricus there. We do appreciate your insight as this war marches forward, and we'll be in touch soon. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.